slide is about our resources that are on our website, www.barbicide.com. There's several things that are available that are relatively new. The first one is our Barbicide certification. That is not new. That has been on our website for about 7 or 8 years now, and it was actually designed for students. It had the student population in mind because it is the basics. It is what's the difference between cleaning and disinfecting? What can I disinfect? How do I do it properly? So if you've been out of school 20 or 30 years, this may feel like it is basics, but it may be a reminder to you that this is how we do it or why we do it. But almost equally as important is at the end, you have the opportunity to print off the certificate you see on your screen. And one of the things Mayor Barrett said that I want to echo is that just opening is not going to be enough for most businesses. I have to feel comfortable to come into your business. I have to feel like it's a safe place to be. So anything you can do to demonstrate that you are doing everything as safely as possible, including a certificate that maybe you have in your window or you have framed at your station, may make your customer feel more comfortable. And we'll talk about that throughout this. We released about a week and a half ago now the COVID-19 certification. All of these, like I said, are free of charge. You go on, you view the information and take a quiz. It has a different certificate, so you may have 2 certificates printed out, but this COVID-19 one is specific to the intersection between the professional beauty industry and what's going on with COVID-19. The safe service establishment, that is something a whole salon might want to do. So what that entails is an establishment, a salon, a barbershop, a spa, whoever's using the product, the owner or manager would sign basically what looks like a contract saying we are committed to these best practices. Regardless of what our state tells us what to do, if that's the baseline, we're going over and above and we're doing these best practices. And that does include having everyone in the business who's working there becoming Barbicide certified. The one nice thing about that is it does allow consumers to go to our website and search by zip code for a safe salon. Doesn't mean that we're out there inspecting them. It just means that they are committing to those practices. And then finally, there's a back to work plan available on our website. It's more of a checklist, if you will, for let's say they tell you you're going to go back to work in 3 days. You could go print it off. You could go over to your place of business and say, check, check, check. I've done all these things. It just makes you feel a little more secure that you've thought about all the things that maybe you hadn't thought about in the past. Next slide, please. So this return to work, we're going to go over some of the stuff that's in the document. I want to remind you that when we talk about this, obviously that date is determined by your state or local government. This is not giving you permission to go back. It's just giving you some food for thought on best practice. And remember, you're always going to follow the rules of your state. As Mayor Barrett also said, there's already rules in place by your state government. And those rules have always been in place and those stay in effect. What may happen is your state or your local government may overlay some guidelines on top of that for this special circumstance. It could be that those become rules in the future, but for right now, they're generally overlaying some guidelines that will go into place. All right, so the next slide. We're going to talk about disinfectants. This is just a reminder about how we do disinfection. It is important, and we get lots of questions about it, so I want to make sure that we go through all of this. Any of the disinfectants that you use in any of these industries throughout the United States are required to be EPA registered. That EPA registration is important because it means that we have proven to the EPA through the use of lab tests at a third-party lab, lab that's not ours, not the EPA's, we've proven everything on our label. We've proven that everything we say we are effective against, we actually are effective against. If we tell you there is a potential health hazard, anything like that, everything on the label has been proven. It is important that whatever disinfectant you choose be bactericidal, virucidal, and fungicidal. And that fungicidal piece is actually very important because that's what makes it not okay for you to use something, let's say like 409. 409 has a bactericidal claim and a virucidal claim, but no fungicidal claim. And fungicidal claims, fungus is the hardest of those 3 to kill, and that's what moves you into that professional realm that would be Barbicide. You're always going to clean before you disinfect. The analogy I made up for myself, but apparently is true, is that when you wash your hair in the shower, you shampoo before you put your conditioner on, right? You do that so your hair is nice and clean so the conditioner can do whatever its job is. Same thing here. If you start with a dirty implement and you put it into the disinfectant, it can't work. So the implement needs to be clean before you disinfect. That can be as simple as soap and water or a chemical cleaner like ShipShape. All of those things would work before disinfection. Every disinfectant you use will have a contact time on it, and that contact time may be something that over the years you may have forgotten about or have not adhered to as strictly as you might want to. That contact time is how long does it take for this chemical to work? And that is important, right? We want to kill everything that's on the label. And every disinfectant has a contact time. In the case of Barbicide, our concentrate is a 10-minute contact time. If you mix up our concentrate and put it in the spray bottle, still a 10-minute contact time. Same with Clippercide. And you will see across the board, whether it's in your grocery store at home or whether you're at a professional beauty supply, that the lowest contact times in general are wipes. You see them in your grocery store at a 4-minute contact time, and in the professional beauty industry, you can see them as low as 2 minutes. Caveat to all that is you probably will have a difficult time finding wipes, probably until the end of the summer across the board. The president of Clorox was on the news earlier this week, acknowledging that that is going to be a supply chain problem for everyone who manufactures wipes. So our workaround is to have you put disinfectant into a spray bottle and use that for the surfaces you might have previously used a wipe. Disinfectant for immersion has to be changed at the beginning of the day, so you have to make it fresh at the beginning of the day. That is a requirement of the EPA, so that will be across all of the disinfectants you use. They must be made fresh daily. But if you're putting them into a spray bottle, because you're not potentially contaminating them, it's in a closed container that nothing is going into, you can actually use that disinfectant until it's completely gone. And just these last two are a reminder that disinfection is for hard, non-porous surfaces. Think glass, metal, plastic, synthetic surfaces, not for your soft surfaces, not for your non-porous, not for your porous items, not for your couch, not for things that are made out of material, not for your towels, and not for your body. Disinfectants are not meant to go on your body or in your body at any time. It's really just made. We'll talk about how you keep those things as clean as possible, but disinfection is for hard, non-porous surfaces. Okay, next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about work areas, and I want to preface this by saying, I think what's going to happen in this industry is that we are going to see that it's not so much what our state requires of us anymore. It's going to be what the consumer requires. Remember that your consumer has been sitting at home for 2 months getting educated. Your consumer knows what disinfection means. Your consumer knows what is safe and what isn't. So questions they may have never asked before, they're going to ask that. So I'm going to give you some ideas on best practice and some ways to get yourself comfortable with it, but also to get your consumer comfortable with it. So when we talk about cleaning and disinfecting, obviously you're going to clean and disinfect all your non-porous and electrical implements. But one of the ideas I've been giving people is, let's say you're using a clipper. And as soon as you're done with your clippers, you take your clippers, I'm still sitting in the chair, and you take your clippers and you get the hair out over the trash can, and you take your whatever spray you're using, let's say Clippercide, and you make one spray. You don't have to fumigate the whole salon, just one spray across your clippers, the edge of your clippers, and this is what you say: I'm disinfecting these for the next customer. Now, you knew that in your head, but you weren't always saying what you were doing as you were doing it, which I think is something you should get into the practice of. Because when you say, I'm disinfecting these for the next customer, you're telling me you did that before I sat down. You're giving me that message that you did that safety thing for me. And it may have just been something that you would have done, previously and just never mentioned it, right? You're going to store those properly disinfected implements into a closed covered container. Typically that's marked as, sometimes it's marked clean, even though they're disinfected. It'd be marked disinfected or ready to use. And what your customer may want to see now, even though it's a rule already, letting them see that container with that lid that says ready to use. And you're pulling out the implements and using them on your consumer and then putting them into a container that is labeled dirty. Now I know that you are following a process of only using properly disinfected implements, and then they're going back and they're being disinfected prior to being used on every customer, including me. I would suggest that you keep track of where you put your own hands. Be conscious of that when you go back. Be conscious of the things that you're touching. I touch my station. I touch my rolling cart. I touch my drawers. I touch all these things. And then I'm touching my consumer. Be aware that you may want to take a moment to properly disinfect your station, your rolling carts, your drawers in between every client, because you are the one moving things around now in that area. And remember, the person most at risk in this environment really actually is you. If you're the stylist, the barber, the nail tech, whatever it is your discipline is, because you're there all day, touching stranger after stranger after stranger after stranger. I only come in for an hour or two. From the looks of things, I might be there longer than that now, but I only come in for an hour or two, and you're there all day long, all right? If you are using a single-use item, so a porous item, think buffing blocks, nail files, all of those things, I would prefer that you pull them out in front of your customer, right? Pull them out when I sit there so I know it came freshly out of whatever packaging it was already in, so that I can see that you are using a new item and I can watch you throw it away when you're done. And then last on this slide, treatment tables. If you are doing something where I'm going to come in and lay on a table, maybe you're waxing eyebrows, that type of thing, whatever that last layer is that you lay on that table, whether that's a sheet or a piece of paper, why don't you wait to put that last layer on until I'm in the room? If I'm standing there and I'm setting my purse down and I'm getting ready to get my eyebrows waxed, whatever that is, now you're pulling out a fresh, brand new sheet out of your closed cabinet or a piece of paper and laying that down so that I can visualize what you're doing to make that surface safer for me to lay on. Next slide. Restrooms are typically something that are not in your rules as far as cosmetology inspectors go, but I do want to address them because your restroom is an area where I think a lot of people, like for me, for example, and I know I might be a little bit more picky than other people, but if I go in your restroom and your restroom is filthy, I think the rest of the place is filthy. It gives me an idea of what you're doing on an everyday basis. So regardless of whether there's rules or not around your restroom, it is a place where people can make an opinion about how you're doing everything else. So I would suggest that you clean and disinfect all the hard, non-porous surfaces, obviously, but even perhaps leaving wipes in there. Something that if I wanted to, let's say I just finished chemotherapy, I'm particularly concerned about my immune system. Maybe I want to get a wipe and I want to wipe the handle of the flush where I flush the toilet or something else prior to me using it. Make that available to me so that I have that option. Replacing your soft goods is going to be more of a task than it ever was because people will be washing their hands more frequently. So if your paper towels used to run out at the end of the day, you might want to check them at noon, for example, to make sure that there's an adequate supply. If you have the opportunity, if you're an owner, if you're somebody who could put these things in, considering upgrading to as many touchless items as you can. Touchless faucets, soap dispensers, paper towel dispensers, even hand sanitizer dispensers, so that instead of me going like this, I'm sticking my hand under and I'm getting a little spray of hand sanitizer. If you ever notice that you are accumulating a bunch of paper towels by your door, put a trash can there. The proper way to wash your hands is, particularly if I have to turn the faucets on and off, is to wash my hands, grab a paper towel, and use that paper towel to turn off the faucet, but also to open the door. So my clean hands aren't touching the handle of the door. The indication to you that you don't have a trash can in the right place is that when somebody opens that door and they still have that dirty paper towel in their hand, they're just tossing it on the floor. Put a trash can there, solves your problem. And then, of course, removing anything that shouldn't be in a restroom, nothing non-essential. So a restroom is for two things, going to the bathroom and washing your hands, right? So those are the only two things that you need any products in there for. Okay, next slide. So your laundry, I would say anything that you left in the salon, the barbershop, anything you left prior to your closure, I would rewash. If you have rules specific to how you launder your items, obviously follow those rules. If you don't have those rules, I think of the washer and dryer like I think of clean and disinfect or shampoo and condition. It's a two-step process, right? So your wash machine works by all of your items go in there and there's all these bubbles and everything goes like this. Everything dances together and knocks things off the towel, for example, and it falls down and it goes out the drain with the water. That's how a wash machine works. Typically, your hot water heater doesn't get hot enough to kill very many things, but what does get hot enough is your dryer. So you put them in the dryer and you leave them in until what I say is hot to the touch. Like if you stuck your hand in, you'd pull it right back. There's no moisture, there's no dampness, and that is really the best you can do with your linens, right? Making sure that they are very, very hot in the dryer and that there is no moisture. I think most states and most localities will overlay this second rule here, and that is if you weren't previously required to launder your capes between clients, maybe you could do it at the end of the day. I think everybody might overlay this rule or this guideline on, and that would be to launder your porous capes between clients, or to disinfect your non-porous capes. So I'm thinking like a color cape, those very thick non-porous ones. And those capes, remember, when you disinfect them, I've watched people disinfect them, and they always want to disinfect the front of them, but that's not what's touching me. So disinfecting both sides of that cape is important. And then always storing them in a closed covered cabinet, and that is typically the rule in all 50 states. Next slide. I think it's practical considerations. All right. So remember to remove non-essential items throughout your salon. The first day you walk into your salon, your barbershop, your spa, look around and say, what do I really not need to have here? Magazines, lookbooks, testers, all of those things, it's time for them to go away, at least for the moment, because they can't be properly disinfected. If I sit and I read a magazine and then I set it down and the next person comes, it's just something we don't need to have. Cleaning all your soft surfaces. So here's where we're talking about your porous items. So a couch, a chair. A couch might just be a mechanical taking a vacuum and just vacuuming the surface of it. If it's made out of that pleather type material, soap and water. If you're talking about the chair that your customer sits in, they're very often made of what I call pleather. So it's almost a vinyl-y product. It's not real plastic. It's not plastic. It's not leather. It's a vinyl. And while I would love for you to disinfect them after every client, the reality is that they're really not meant to hold up to that, because it will dry that material and that material will crack. If you think about going into a diner and you see the bench of a booth where it's already cracked and all the foam's coming through, that's a very dried out piece of pleather or vinyl. So what I'm recommending here, unless you have rules that say otherwise, is to disinfect the chair your customer sits in, maybe at the beginning of the day, maybe in the middle of the day, maybe at the end, but after every client may be too aggressive for that material. So consider putting a barrier method, maybe putting a towel over the back of the chair where your hands might rest while you're doing your work, and over the armrest, and then those can be laundered, unless you have other rules. Obviously, you're going to clean and disinfect all the non-porous surfaces that are high-touch areas, light switches, doorknobs, all of those things, and following the contact time when you do that. Discontinuing handshaking. I say that with a smile on my face because I don't like handshaking. I've never liked handshaking. Not a fan. I actually have been known to say that it would be safer to kiss strangers because you don't put your lips where you put your hands. You don't flush a toilet with them. You don't open a door with them. But since that's not appropriate, we're just going to discontinue handshaking. I think that that might be seen as a little bit aggressive in this current environment. It is a hard habit to break. If you've been doing it your whole life as a sign of respect, you will probably have consumers of yours, your clients, that may come in with their outstretched hand. I've missed you. I haven't seen you in a long time. They want to hug you. They want to shake your hand, and trying to create that method for you that works of, I joke about it. It's like, oh, you know what I do for a living. I'm not shaking your hand. But coming up with something that is genuine to you and comfortable is really important. And then discontinuing food and drink services. If you have, let's say, a Keurig, and I can go get a cup of coffee when I come in, now might be the time to either discontinue it totally, or if your rules allow for it, move it back into a private area where you can say to me, would you like a cup of coffee? And now you go back, you wash your hands, you make me the cup of coffee, and you bring me the coffee, and then you go disinfect the machine right afterwards. You don't want everybody touching all the buttons on a machine, or even opening a small refrigerator to get a water bottle. You might want to be the one that does that, so you can ensure that the handles are all properly disinfected and that you've limited how many people have touched the same surface. Okay, next slide. Scheduling and payment, I think, are the two areas that I have seen literally every state address in their guidelines going forward. I think that these two changes will most affect barbers and nail salons because of how they operate. It could be that it affects other people just as heavily, but right now I think we're seeing the biggest effect in barbering and the nail salon market. Scheduling has been in every rule. Every single state guideline I've seen has had a scheduling requirement to discontinue walk-in services. And there's several reasons for that. If you have a gatekeeper approach, whether that is you have a scheduling software system that you're already using, but maybe you don't. Let's say you are a barbershop that has always done walk-ins. It doesn't have to be as complicated as you going out and buying a software system. What it can be is a sign on your door that says, I can no longer do walk-in services. Please call this phone number and I will get you on my wait list, whatever that looks like. They can call you. It can be your own cell phone, whatever number you want to put there. And you simply are just keeping a list of who wants to come and when. And maybe you can say to me, come back at 3 o'clock. That's when my next time will be. It's a very loose scheduling, but at least it is keeping those numbers lower. You don't want 50 people standing in a waiting area, shoulder to shoulder, waiting to get a service. You don't want that because it's not safe, but you also don't want it because you need time to turn your station. You need time to do the proper cleaning and disinfection. And I'm going to also say you might in the early days need that time just to go back to the back and take a deep breath. Wearing PPE, having people anxious to get in, you feeling anxious, them feeling anxious, you may need those 10 minutes just to gather your own thoughts, make yourself feel like you're centered. So continuing to do that is important. The other thing that will become really important, I think, as we go forward is that if you are scheduling people, at least writing down a name and a phone number so you can call them back. Let's say they're sitting in their car and you're going to call them and tell them when to come in. That allows for contact tracing. I'm sure Claire might address that may be an issue going forward. But let's say that I am doing hair today and I see 8 clients in my salon. And then tomorrow I get diagnosed with COVID-19. Somebody at the health department might want to ask me, who did you see in the last 3 days? So we can contact them and let them know they may have come into contact with someone who is COVID-19 positive. So it allows for that contact tracing to occur. Payment, most states are requesting that you discontinue cash payments. Obviously, there are some people that aren't prepared to pay in another format, so that may be a little tricky in the beginning. But encouraging any way that doesn't require me to hand you something, you hand it back. If you have the ability to do Venmo, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, those are all great things to use. If you have something that I either have to sign, like the iPad, or where I stick my finger in and I put in my PIN, I would suggest putting hand sanitizer right next to that equipment so I can sanitize my hands before I put it in and then again after. And if you observe me while I'm doing it and I don't do either of those steps, as soon as I walk out the door, you should probably be disinfecting that point of sale equipment right away, just so everybody else isn't touching it. All right, next slide. Personal protective equipment. I get asked this question, I'm not kidding you, 1,000 times a week. It is the most common question. Governors ask it. Everybody asks, what can we really do here? So I'm giving you my opinion. Now, this is 100% my opinion. You may have different rules that come out, but here is my opinion. Masks. I look at masks as a sign of respect. I wear a mask to protect you, so I expect you to wear a mask to protect me. That is how masks work. And I think it is okay in this environment to ask your clients, your patrons, to please wear a mask, to be mindful of the fact that you've been off work for 2 months and you can't afford to get sick. I mean, there are a million reasons why you would wear a mask. And look, it is not an infringement, in my opinion, on my rights. It's just me being respectful of other people. We all live in a society together. And if this works, we should at least try it. It's not that uncomfortable. But I would say wear a mask because you're doing it for the people that sit in your chair who are paying you money. If I'm paying you money, I definitely want you to respect me. I think you should be offering a mask to patron. You might actually just be setting that standard with them in advance. So maybe sending them an email or a text message saying, I'm so excited to get back to work. I can't wait to schedule you. But here are the expectations you can have of me and I can have of you. Just because I'm coming in and paying for a service doesn't mean I get to dictate every piece of how that service works. If I showed up to get my hair cut and I had no pants on, you wouldn't provide me the service, right? Because that is not how we work in our society, right? So we all have expectations. And I think today this is a kind of a minimum expectation of people. Remember that masks are uncomfortable if you wear them for a long period of time. So I am not suggesting that you necessarily get a surgical or medical grade mask, certainly not an N95. As a nurse, I can tell you N95 masks are extremely uncomfortable for long periods of time. The nurses you see on Facebook taking off their mask and they have all the marks on their face, that's because they have a properly fitted N95 mask. I would say that my opinion is that in this case, a well-made cloth mask, maybe bringing 4 or 5 with you to work, remembering that anytime you touch that mask, particularly the face of the mask, you need to put a new one on. So bringing extras, because you undoubtedly will accidentally touch it during the day or take it off to answer the phone or eat your lunch, whatever that is, and you'll want to be able to take them home and launder them and bring them back. But get a mask that's comfortable and try it at home. You know, when you go to the grocery store, you're in the grocery store, 45 minutes, and you're concentrating on other things. But if you have to wear a mask and stand there for 8 hours, it will get uncomfortable. So practice at home. Put the mask on, sit and watch a TV show you like. Some people will start to hyperventilate right when they put it on because they're anxious about wearing it. So if you're sitting and you're relaxing, you're training your body that it's okay, right? That you can get plenty of oxygen even though you're wearing a mask. Gloves, I'm not a fan of. I almost never would recommend this rule because, in my opinion, if you don't wear gloves for a living, you don't wear them properly. I would rather see a naked hand that is properly washed than a gloved hand where somebody has worn it all day and touched this and this and this. You feel like you're safe because your hand is covered. But what you're doing is moving things from surface to surface to surface to surface. And when states make a rule that require you to wear gloves, my concern is that as the supply of gloves gets smaller and smaller and smaller and the prices go up and up and up, being able to source them because you either can't find them or you can't afford to pay with them will drive people to wear the same glove all day long, which is really not a safe use of gloves. They're single use. Just think about it this way. If as a nurse, I came into your room and I already had my gloves on, you probably wouldn't feel comfortable that I should be touching you, right? But if you are wearing gloves or if you are asked to wear gloves, picking a glove is important. The glove of choice in your industry, in my opinion, would be a nitrile glove. It fits well, you can feel things, and it doesn't have the allergy problems that latex gloves have. If you use latex gloves, in my opinion, that you should put a sign in the front of your space and let all of your customers know before they come that you will be using latex gloves because latex allergies are very severe and people can die from them. And think about when you're on an airplane and nobody gets one single peanut because one person is allergic. It's the same thing with latex gloves. So making your consumer aware that that's the issue. And I'm also not a fan of the taking of temperatures. You may be required to do it. I don't actually know what the rules are in Wisconsin. I'm trying to sort of make this a generic presentation for everybody every time I do it. But the reality is only 23% of people that have COVID-19 actually have this symptom. And nobody seems to be able to agree on what the point is where that fever matters. Georgia opened a couple weeks ago and said 99.7. On a hot day in Georgia, you might be 99.7 every day, right? And then other states have opened saying 100.4 is the mark, the demarcation where you're considered to have a fever that could be COVID. But my biggest problem with this is that I don't want you to get a false sense of security. If you take my temperature and my temperature says 98.6, that doesn't mean I'm safe. It doesn't mean you don't need to wear a mask. I don't need to wear a mask. Because 60% of people are asymptomatic or have such mild symptoms that they're out doing things. They're going to the barbershop. They're going to the beauty shop. They're going to Target. They're getting on the subway. They're getting on the bus. This is why this isn't like the flu. I mean, there's a lot of reasons it's not like the flu, but this is one of the key reasons. When you get the flu, you are so sick, you go straight to bed. You don't go to Target. You don't go to the barbershop. You don't go get on the subway because you're so sick. But here, 60% of people that are out spreading it don't feel sick at all, which is why things like a mask, even if you feel fine and everybody around you feels fine, to me is the way to go. What I've been telling people in this industry is to apply universal or standard precautions that you learned in cosmetology or barbering school. When you learned it that blood and body fluids were potentially infectious. Typically, then we were talking about HIV and hepatitis. I'd like you to take that same concept and pretend like everybody, including you, is COVID-19 positive. Try it this weekend. Go to the grocery store. Walk into the grocery store and pretend like you know you have it and pretend like everybody else in the grocery store has it. You will behave differently just if you get that mindset. You will be more cautious, and I think that that is a way you can go forward and do things safely. Okay, next slide. Which I think is hand hygiene, my favorite thing. I love hand hygiene. Okay, so you never hear Dr. Fauci or anybody else get up and talk about hand sanitizer. You don't hear it because the gold standard is hand washing. Simple hand washing, like you were taught as a child, soap and water, right? Ideally, I would like you to wash your hands at every opportunity for a couple of reasons. One is that hand washing protects your skin integrity far better, makes your skin much smoother, softer, and less open, fewer openings than hand sanitizer. It does actually a better job, because the way hand washing works is I put my hands together, we're back to the wash machine, and that friction and those bubbles causes whatever's on my hands to run down the sink with the water. It's why we tell you to do it for 30 seconds. Even if you cannot wash your hands in between every client, if what you are allowed to do is hand sanitizer, I definitely want you to wash your hands in these circumstances: before and after you eat, before and after you smoke, and after using the restroom. When you are eating and smoking, you're putting your hands up by your face, so you should start that with clean hands, and you should clean your hands after that. Providing hand sanitizer for your clients everywhere you can think of is a great idea. And then maintaining intact skin. I already said that I think soap and water does a better job of that, but to be specific, lukewarm water. Hot water doesn't make it any better. It just dries your hands out more, right? It's those 30 seconds of friction that make hand washing work. So lukewarm water, putting lotion on at night before you go to bed, all of those things will help maintain intact skin and allow you to not have a lot of other openings in your hands that will put you at risk for other types of infections. Next slide. I believe the next slide is going to be on social distancing. Here's the reality. You cannot provide a totally safe service as any type of professional beauty industry participant at this point. I know it, you know it, your consumer knows it. If you're standing right here, I now know that's not safe. If you're sitting 2 feet across a nail table, that's not safe. You should not be telling people, I provide a safe service, I provide a safe service. What you should be saying is, I understand your concerns about social distancing, but that is why I went to school. That is why I learned about infection control, so that I can mitigate the risk and make it as safe as possible. I tell people all the time, when you go to the hospital and you're getting surgery, the surgeon doesn't promise you that you're going to live. The surgeon doesn't promise you they're even going to fix your problem. What the surgeon says to you is, hey, I want to do this surgery on you, and here's this whole list of things that could go wrong, including you could die. But I want you to trust that I went to medical school and I got a license, so I know how to mitigate those risks and make it as safe as possible. And that is what you're doing. You're mitigating the risk to make this as safe as possible using what you learned about infection control, whether it was 20 years ago in school or you went and took the Barbicide certification. However you reminded yourself that you have that in you, that's what you need to say. I understand your concern, so am I, but this is what I'm doing. Okay, next slide. So here's how we want to prepare our customer. I want you to feel so confident when you go back to work that you know what you need to do. That's part of all of this. It's why you're on here today on a Saturday morning, because you want to be prepared. But the other half of being prepared is, how do you make your customer feel comfortable, right? Just remember that if you're nervous, so are they, and anything that you're doing to make them safer should be shared. Things like I talked about, demonstrating that you're disinfecting the clippers, demonstrating, if you're a barber, you almost always have a sink right there. Wash your hands in front of your consumer. Don't do it before I sit down. Wash them while I'm there so I can see that you did it. If you go to the back to get a clean towel, here's what you might want to say to me. I'm going to go to the back, wash my hands, and get a clean towel. Now you just told me 2 things you did that protect me. Your hands are washed, and I have a clean towel, right? Little things like that. Consider putting up a sign in your doorway, or sending a text, or posting it on your social media that says, here's all the things we did before you came back to make it a safer experience. We know you're, uncomfortable, and here's what we did, but here's what we expect from you. Here's what you can expect from us. No one's going to come to work sick here, but also we're not going to provide a service when somebody's sick. I've talked to a lot of already open salons, and one of the things they're doing is, because they're scheduling, if someone cancels on short notice and uses the excuse, I'm sick, then they tell them, we're going to put you on a 14-day hold before we can reschedule you. Think outside the box. Think about how you can ensure that as few people as possible are coming through your place of business who may be sick, and that includes everybody who works for you. Let your clients know you want them to ask questions. Say to them, hey, I got this Barbicide certification. I learned all these things. Share with them what you know and let them ask you questions about what you're doing. And I just want to remind you, you know this. You know everything you need to know to go back. Don't be afraid that you don't have all the tools you need. Just remember that you have all the tools right in front of you, right, to make this as safe as possible. And then the last slide, I think, is preparing yourself. So here's the one thing that nobody seems to be talking about that I really want to spend a minute on. How do you become safer so that you don't get sick? You've already had 2 months off work. You don't need to take any more time off. You want to get back to work. You want to make a living. You've got a family to feed. You've got rent to pay, all of those things. So the first one is using antibiotics correctly. Obviously, this is a viral illness, and you learned in cosmetology and barbering school that we don't give you antibiotics for a virus, only for a bacterial infection. But let's say you have been on an antibiotic during this time period. Life is still happening. People are still getting strep throat. People are still getting UTIs. People are still getting common colds and all types of things, right? If you are on an antibiotic, use it properly and complete the entire prescription. Don't go use half of one that your sister gave you or half of one you have left from the last time you had this problem. That will all of these things are intended to make your entire immune system more active and better prepared should you come into contact with COVID-19. Because remember, it's your immune system are counting on widely to save you if you do get sick with the virus. Stop smoking. Smoking is the worst offender of your immune system. So if you can stop smoking during this time period or at least limit your exposure to smoke, that's a great idea. Making 8 hours a habit. Sleep is when your body regenerates. When you're in bed, it's when everything goes to work. It's like everything inside of you is starting to work. All the things that you're not doing during the day, at night, everything quiets down, and your body, your immune system, most of all, benefits from you getting a good amount of sleep. I say make 8 glasses a habit. I'm not a huge fan of water. I don't like drinking it that much. So 8 glasses, your body isn't great at differentiating between fluids. Obviously, some fluids are more dehydrating than others. And I've been known to say, don't make those 8 glasses like Jack Daniels. That's not what I'm recommending. But I am saying stay well hydrated, right? Keep enough fluid in your system. Sometimes I think as a nurse, I can relate that I would limit my fluids during my shift because I didn't want to have to stop to go to the bathroom. And arguably that might happen to you when you come back into your place of business because you'll be so busy. But all of those fluids do help. And I notice Alan's drinking his right now. Stay at home when you're sick. Consider getting immunized. You touch more of all the careers in the world, of all the types of employment you could have. If you take out all the medical things, medical, dental, and illegal professions, if you just stick with the legal ones, nobody touches strangers as much as you guys do, right? You are touching stranger after stranger after stranger. Even if you think you know me, because I come in once every 4 weeks or 5 weeks, you don't know what my lifestyle is like 100%. So consider immunizations, talk to your doctor. Consider getting some consistent exercise. Just walking is enough. It doesn't have to be painful, but remember, you stand in the same position or sit in the same position day after day after day, and that isn't good for your body going forward. Eat your vitamins, and then finally, this is my favorite bullet point. It has been in this presentation since 10 years ago. Keep your hands to yourself. You have to touch all these strangers all day long as part of your job. Mitigate that risk by keeping your hands to yourself all the other times. You don't need to be hugging your neighbor. You don't need to be touching other people. And when you do touch somebody, look, it's not the end of the earth, but remember, hey, I've touched something. So now the next step I have to do is reminding myself not to touch my face in particular and get my hands washed, right? It's not like your hands are gonna, nothing, you're not gonna get COVID that's living just on your hands. It's when you get it into your body that's a problem. So washing your hands and not touching your face.